Hello, everybody. Thank you for checking out the latest segment of the Nerditude Movie Podcast, which is an interview with the Nelms Brothers. I was able to sit down, fortunately, and have a nice chat with Ian and Eshom about not only Fatman, but their previous works and their foray into television and the future of what they have going on. And it was a great interview. Thank you for watching. Please do enjoy. But, okay, so I don't know if you guys are ready.
Thanks for having us, man.
Thank you for being here. I am here with Ian and Eshom Nelms. Sorry, I almost said Holmes. I don't know what's on my mind. Nelms, the Nelms Brothers. Now, I do have, and this is probably my biggest question for you guys. It's a two-parter, and I do want to apologize for hitting you hard up front. First question is, the G.I. Joe Wars. Is it a true story?
1,000%. As a matter of fact, I just was in the garage a couple months ago, and I unearthed them in a big. I mean, like they're in like a refrigerator box. I'm not kidding. There's that many of them.
Second part: were these the 3.75 inchers, or are we talking the like 11, 12 inch? Okay. See, now I asked this
figures. Yeah.
Because I myself, I was a huge G.I. Joe fan, and just recently I was out during Christmas time and had seen they had like a bundle of them. And I couldn't resist. And they just kind of sit on the desk. And one of these days when the wife is asleep and nobody can, it's 4 a.m, I'll get them back out and maybe play with them. But I read that in your guys' bio, and it just struck a chord because I was that kid that the floor was covered in their trucks, and this guy's missing it. You know, this one broke, but it's okay. He could be the guy that lost an arm in battle. You know, so... Yeah. I had to know if that was entirely true, and bigger, of course, was what G.I. Joe, because when people hear G.I. Joe, they think the doll, and for me, it was always those little plastic guys with the springs that would pop and shoot into people's eyes. Yeah. But I had to know that.
Yeah, we would cover the floor with them, and then our parents also owned a horse ranch. So I remember there was a couple of times where we took them outside and set them up, and I mean, I don't know, man. There was nothing cooler than setting those things up, and our battles would take days. Like it would take days for us to get through these setups that we had, because we had hundreds of men and vehicles, and it was just like, it was epic, man.
There was like this bank that went up to the well. So my parents had a well, they're not on city water; they're in the country, and the Cobra and his men were guarding the well, and then they would open up the floodgate and flood down the G.I. Joes. Yeah, it was a whole elaborate thing.
I learned a very important lesson about water. And do you remember the Cobras used to have that giant speaker box on the back of them? That you would, it was literally a battery box where you would press it and Cobra would come out the back of it. Well, I
don't think we had any of that advanced.
Oh, we had an above ground pool.
I recall those, however.
We had an above ground pool, and I learned very young that above ground pool plus G.I. Joes can equal sad stories later on in the day.
Oh, no.
But
no more voice box.
With the G.I. Joes, it was all about that verticality. Like, how can we make the battlefield? Like I'm from Chicago, so when they tore down a house next to me and they built a new one on the fence, they had a slat of wood that they had basically just sitting there. That was a bridge. That was, where they were going to get tossed off, and it was, so I did want to make sure that we were on the same wavelength as far as the 3.75 inch ones, though. Now on to what we're here to talk about. I'd like to talk about a little bit about the earlier work, Waffle Street and Small Town Crimes, and something I did notice as a theme in your writing is you guys really know how to write in the grounded, realistic point of view. You write characters that are heavily realistic, but a lot of the time it's also about the human struggle. So whether it be Waffle Street, the struggle of getting here and then being shot down and rebuilding, Small Town Crime, the struggle to fight the inner demons and fend off our addictions, or whether it be a broke Santa who's become disenfranchised with children and how they believe in him. Is it hard for you guys to stay so grounded with how you write, or is that always the focus?
It's probably a blessing and a curse, right? So it's like, it's what we gravitate toward. I mean, you were mentioning Lost on Purpose before we jumped on here as well. Like, I mean, again, that's another one that's, the plight of the working man, the blue collar working man. It's what we grew up with. Like we grew up on a horse ranch. Our parents were professional photographers, but for about 20 some odd years. but they owned their own business, and it was very much, like how do we survive? How do we keep going? How do we, because it was all, they had to run every aspect of it themselves. And then beyond that, we're surrounded by, agriculture and dairy farms, and that's pretty much the area. It's a lot of these blue collar folks that are out to, DIY, and they're just hardworking people, trying to figure out how to hopefully, grow their businesses and do better. And it's, that's a big thing where we're from, is that kind of work of the blue collar working man. So I feel like it permeates everything we do. Yeah. It really does.
Yeah, I think we enjoy just putting ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And, well, I don't think like Waffle Street is obviously not a terribly extraordinary circumstance. It is a circumstance.
Well, it's one, back when you think of the financial crash of 2008, it is one of the circumstances where you did have guys driving up to work at Costco in a Beamer. Yeah. That was not an uncommon thing. So I like how you guys took that, and I know it's based off of a book, but I do really appreciate how you really showed there's a message in every, I believe at least, there's a message in all of your guys' work, whether it be a story about Santa or Waffle Street or Lost on Purpose. It's all, to me, what comes through to me is very much like persevere. The message in a lot of it is, no matter what, you're going to move forward. It's not going to be easy. It's not always going to be pretty, but moving forward is the main goal. And I think that drives every character you guys write.
I love that. I think that's absolutely a theme that we not only gravitate towards, but write often. I think that especially with these gray area characters, that we like to write. We like to write flawed characters. We like, they're very human in our minds. I think that especially we want their moral compass has to be aimed in the right direction, but especially with these gray area characters, I feel like that for us, you want them progressing, you want them pushing, you want them going hard, and it's not always, like you said, it's not always clean. It's usually messy. But yeah, that's a lot of fun for us. Like movies like the Dirty Harry series, or like even the Clint Eastwood westerns, the Leone westerns. Those are all those characters are super flawed, but they are always sort of pushing the envelope and running into people that are worse than they are, that they have to sort of take care of or fight their way through.
Yeah.
And I think it's also how we were raised. Our dad's very much a work through it, grit it out kind of guy, get to the other side kind of thing.
It's that generation. That generation was all about,
It is.
Keep moving, keep going, doesn't matter, you can't stop.
There wasn't a lot of coddling in our house. It was like
a lot of love.
Put some dirt on it and get back in the yard.
Yeah, no, I grew up very much the same way, where there was a certain way you went about yourself, and the deviations weren't really allowed. It was, you were loved, but in the same token, it was, you're going to be a good person, and this is how you're going to act in life around people. I did want to ask, because you guys have worked with, some incredible actors. Everybody from, obviously, Mel Gibson and Walton Goggins to Octavia Spencer to Jane Krasinski, C. Thomas Howell. Danny Glover was a huge one. Seeing him in Waffle Street was amazing. Clifton Collins Jr., his role in Small Town Crime was, as soon as he hits screen, it was like, oh, all right, this is amazing. He was one of my favorite characters in that movie, hands down. Robert Forrester, Anthony Anderson, Marshall Bell, which I was talking to Ian earlier about how I'm a huge 80s movie fan. That's Quado from Total Recall to me. So when I saw him, I was like, oh no, Marshall Bell's in this. So my real question is, do you guys write these characters with people in mind, or is it something where you kind of allow it to float and the actors gravitate towards it?
A little bit of both. Okay. A little bit of both. So like with someone like Marshall Bell, that's just an actor that we really enjoy, from Total Recall, from those past roles.
Twins, you name it. He was in the 80s was his era.
We're like, we got to get him in here. It wasn't conceived with him in that role, but once we saw, came across his name, it was like, he'd be amazing. I think somebody like, for instance, Anthony Anderson in Small Town Crime, he was our number one from the beginning. Okay. Because he's so innately likable, and we knew that you had to land with that character hot. You had to instantly understand who he was and relate to him and he and Mike's relationship. So we're like, Anthony comes with a certain, persona. It's almost like him. You're like, he's like the really nice friend, you know. So it was like, okay, he's gonna be a great for that role. Yeah, and sometimes the casting evolves, right? Like, for instance, on Fatman, like when we first wrote Fatman, it was 14 years ago, and we envisioned that character as Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
But you know, 14, you know, in 2016, we saw Mel at a screening of Hacksaw Ridge, and we're like, oh, that's Kris. That's our guy right there, you know? So that casting evolved. So every role is a little bit different.
He did have that wicked beard at that time, too, because he had done Expendables and then right into The Professor and the Madman. And
Exactly.
he had that crazy, awesome going beard, which you knew it was a type of beard that he just loved. Just, like, he'd sit there. That was his comfort zone. Like, if I had that good of a beard, I'd be petting it most of the time as well. So it is understandable.
Well, you've got a good one. I mean, I can't do that.
You have a nice beard.
Well, I made the joke, you know, my wife, we've been together, it'll be 12 years March 1st. She's never seen me without a form of facial hair. So,
Wow.
you know, I made the joke one day about shaving it, and then I kind of thought about it. I was like, wait, but it's on my logo now. I can't do that. So that's my excuse for not having to shave it, is like, you know, it's going to mess with the image. I do have two small questions about small town crime and their character base. First off, the orthopedic. Was his name made to elicit mystery and then purposely left mysterious, or was there a backstory that never came to fruition?
It was based off of his shoes. So that name and the other guy, Tony Lama, the two hitmen, were based off of their shoes, because when we first
Introduced them in the shot.
wrote the script, the first thing that you were supposed to see of them was their shoes. But that's not how it ended up in the edit.
Okay.
So when we wrote the script, it was like a pair of orthopedic shoes step into frame, and then a pair of boots, Tony Lama boots, step in afterward. And then it was like, and then you start to do the reveal slowly on those characters. And when we did the edit, we ended up using something else to get them in. I can't recall exactly what their first scene is right now, but
The orthopedic's first scene is technically masked when they show him murder the first girl.
and then you're behind them in the car now, right? And you kind of, the intros with them driving up, then you realize they're following him, and then like they sort of have a quick conversation in the car, and then their boots kind of show up.
Yeah.
So we ended up kind of mixing and I think we moved that scene anyway. It ended up being a little bit of a different than what we had written. The way we directed it, the way we edited it, ended up being a little bit different. So those names came out of just how we were telling the story. And it was funny though, on set, Ratchford, the guy who plays orthopedic, phenomenal actor.
Oh, he's
great guy.
I loved him in it. He was that right amount of menacing. Like, you could look at him and see that he's a little older, not the healthiest, but his entire premise was just like, I don't know if I'd want to be in the same dark room with that guy. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It was that, like, you're obviously got something going on with you.
But he nicknamed his character the Rhino. Because of some of the direction we were giving him. We were just like there's that moment where he steps across that fence, you know, when he's on his way up to Mike's house.
Yes.
And he just plows right across the downed fence. And I remember Eshom giving him the note of like, hey man, just because he was like going around it. We're like, no, just go right over it. Like, you don't even see it. And he was just all, just plowed right over it. It was so fun. He just killed it. And then from there on, he was like, all right, I got this guy. Like, he's a Rhino, like, just call me the Rhino.
I think that's pretty apt, yeah.
So
Jeremy
great.
fully realized that character when he showed up on set. And like, we had some things written into the script, like the Coke bottle glasses and the hearing aid and stuff like that. But he came with that like badass facial hair and stuff. And we were like, honestly, we were like, oh, Jeremy, I don't think this is going to work because he's like posing as a cop, So like, no, cops usually don't have facial hair. And he goes, are you kidding me? This guy has no idea what he fucking looks like. he's like in his own world. And honestly, like, Ian and I turned to each other and we're like, what? He's absolutely right. Like, yeah, like, let's go.
I do gotta say, Dale Dickey, the way you guys wrote that, how she knew about the badge, absolutely brilliant. Because it is one of those scenes where she takes you down a little bit of a rabbit hole explaining it. It could have just been as simple as, no, there's a logo on the badge that doesn't, but she kind of leads you into what's, and I watched that just the other night again, and that scene every time has a certain It's just a very like you can cut the tension with a knife. As a moviegoer, I feel like I know what's going to come, what's next, but I'm still kind of like, what the hell is going to go on between these two?
And that's totally to Dale's credit, right? Like,
yeah.
we
so
knew
good.
we had to have Dale come in and do that. I mean, look, it's a smaller role, but we knew it needed to pop. And when Sandy when the bartender starts going off, it's like we knew Dale would have the gravitas and the chops to get it done.
Yeah, because there wasn't anything we were kind of ready to leave to chance, you know. And when I say that, I mean it was like we'd worked with Dale 2 other times, and when we wrote that script, we kind of had her in mind for that role because it was such a badass moment. We were like, she doesn't have a lot to do during the film, but this moment has to be clutch. We have to have somebody fantastic in this. And so when we went to her, we said, hey, I know it's a small role, but will you do it? She was like, oh yeah, honey, I got this, girl. She's such a badass. She just came out, closed it down, and she's hanging out for 2-3 days.
Yeah, she's
Sandy, right? That's the character's name.
I believe
yes.
so.
Hey, Sandy, is it?
I'm a huge fan of hers from everything from. She's also in True Blood for quite a bit of that show and things like that. So she pops up in kind of random movies, and when you see her, she's always an actress where you're like, hey, it's her. You know, I love her. And yeah, her turn at that to me was kind of that, proving the fact that it's almost like the orthopedic is the unstoppable force, and Mike is that wall he's going to run into. Because, and this goes into my next question. Mike has obviously got a problem with alcohol addiction. He's rarely sober. He sabotages himself to stay on unemployment, so he can do what he wants to do and go drink away that unemployment money. And first question is, did he do his own driving scenes? Was that him driving the whole time? Because he has got a lead foot.
So I would say John drove 99% of the time.
Okay.
So most of those like gravel spewing 180s where he's like racing down the road and all that, almost all of those are John. I think there's one that isn't John, and that was just because John wasn't there at that moment in time.
Okay.
But it's funny because like we put John in the car. I'm like, hey John, you a car guy? Because Ian and I were super hyped about finding that note.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was a beast, and it had the engine, you know, it had the 427 big block in it to back it up.
It sounded so lovely. Every time he hits it, though, you hear that gravel spin, you hear it rev. Oh, it's such a lovely sounding car.
Yeah, and John's like, I'm not really a car guy. And we're like, okay, but he's like, I'd like to take a spin behind this one. And he started doing all the stunts, and like it was impressive as heck. And we're like, John, what are you talking about? You're not a car guy. Like, dude, you're handling that thing like you're Mario Andretti. And he's like, I don't know, man. There's something about when I get behind the wheel of that car, Mike Kendall comes out. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive.
An extension of his character, right?
Yeah, it's almost like you could shoot a 100% one shot entire scene of him where he goes from getting his ass kicked or yelled at by his sister Octavia Spencer to ripping out of the driveway, and because it seemed like he was at home in that car, he could do it. Like every scene, I was like, it's got to be him driving. There's no way. There's a stunt guy in there, and he is ripping out of those driveways.
Yeah, it was. We would jump in there and we would do some of the stuff with him, and he definitely knew how to handle that machine. And we would get peppy on the roads.
So, this leads me to my next question about Mike in this movie. Were you trying to portray that he was a man because he's a badass? He's got no fear. And throughout the movie, I couldn't decide if he had no fear because his addiction has just taken over and it doesn't matter, or does he have no fear because he's kind of at the end of his rope and he truly fears nothing because what does he have? Was it intentional to show him somewhat reckless, and was showing him reckless more of because he's got a problem, or because he really is a guy at the end of his rope that just is trying to piece it together?
I mean, for us, it's a bit of both. I mean, there's a lot of hints in there in the beginning that you see that he's a bit of a reckless human being, driving drunk, like doing a lot of really stupid shit. But he is a fearless guy, and they went hand in hand for us. One of the character traits that we really liked about Mike is that he's a functional drunk and it's almost like he gets liquid courage and is able to maybe like function at a high level when he's loose, when he's had a few drinks. He may be at his best. So it's like when he gets in that shootout with the guy that kills his partner in the flashback, like he takes that guy out, and know, because of the conversation that he had, that he was inebriated, or at least had been drinking. At the end of the movie, when he gets in the firefight with Ratchford and James, like he tells, he's having a beer, he's getting loose, he's getting into character, he's getting into form, he knows he has to perform here, and so he's got to take the edge off. And like, I think he says something like, he's like, "Are you drunk?" And he's like, "I'm getting comfortable." It's like, I'm sliding into myself right now so that I can perform the best that I can, is basically what he's telling him right there. We like that about the character. And the other side of it was that he was so far down as a human being that he was so desperate, to get back on the force, to be somebody again, to solve a crime, to be a cop again, to do what he was great at. Because in our minds, he was great at it. He just had an alcohol problem, and had those don't mix.
Well, it goes back to that human struggle that is the kind of essential theme, and a lot of it is, without this issue, he could have been, detective wherever he wanted to go on the force. And I did want to touch down real quick. I do love your guys' gunplay. Much like your writing, the gunplay and the action sequences are very grounded. I myself love to go to the range. I am familiar with weapons. I've used quite a few. And I just love the fact that when you watch specifically the scene where they show his partner get murdered, you could, if you didn't know if it was a movie, could confuse sections of that as body cam footage or dash cam footage, because it is a very, this is how it would happen. Trunk, at the end of the movie, trunk lids don't protect you from gunfire. And I love how visceral it is, because it does, I think of the movie Collateral when I think of how your guys' gunplay is, because they used real life 45s, and this is throughout, in my opinion, throughout Fatman and Small Town Crime. I do appreciate how you guys keep not only the writing very grounded, but the action sequences are very steeped in reality.
Yeah, I just think that comes from a taste, right? So I don't, Ian and I aren't a fan of we don't use a lot of real guns, except when we're on set. Our dad is a fan of real guns, and so we grew up around real guns, and we fired many. But I'm an avid paintball player.
Oh, okay.
And so some of that comes through, but also we understand that a sheet metal doesn't protect you. We want to see bullets ripping out the other side of that stuff. This isn't a game. This isn't a video game, right?
No,
so
exactly.
For us, it's no, this needs to feel how it would be. And so, and I think we have tastes similar to you. We love Michael Mann's gunplay.
Yeah.
He does it really well. I think some of this stuff that's out now can desensitize you, or it just feels kind of like a farce, and not that we don't have fun with that, but that's more stylistic, in a way.
Yeah, there's very much, and a lot of the movies, action is very much over-exaggerated nowadays. When you think of any big-budget action movie, it's, hanging off the side of a car. Every grenade, does a 45-foot-in-the-air explosion. And I do feel you guys treat violence in your movies very much the same way, where in an action movie, they may use violence as kind of like, oh, yeah, I love blood. I feel you guys use it to accent the scenery, almost like when, Mike is driving down those vistas and you have the mountains in the background. And I know you guys are a huge fan of Westerns, and the whole showdown at the end of Small Town Crime where he is saying, I'm just getting comfortable. To me, that was akin to, Eastwood putting on the gun holster and getting into his, I'm going to go do some shooting character. And that's why I really did love Mike. And I do feel you guys have an incredible eye for violence, because it's not used as in a, let's exploit it. It's used in a, no, you took 4 shots to the chest. You did this. This is very much realistic. It's used to paint a picture. And that's why I really appreciate your guys' style in that.
Thanks, man. That's awesome. The one thing which I think you're tuning into as well, that we love to do, that I think, just something Esh and I talk about when we're writing some of those scenes, like a lot of the action scenes, and when we're talking to the actors, it's like, like the style that we're going for at the end of the day has a lot to do with consequences. You know, it's like when there's action, there has to be consequences, and you're tapping into that by saying, like, man, I love that the bullets rip through the sheet metal, and I love that that when somebody gets hit, like, you're like, oh shit, they got hit. You know, it's there are, you know, those sort of diehard moments where somebody gets hit in the shoulder and they're able to go on. You know what I mean?
You can't have the main character made of fiberglass either. There has to be, some disbelief.
Right. But pretty much in the blood and the violence we do like to do, it has kind of this, dare I say, Cronenberg sort of feel to it, where it's visceral, it's bloody, it's nasty, and it's on purpose, because the last thing we want anybody to do is watch an action scene and think that would be fun to be in that action scene. I want you to watch that action scene and say, holy shit, I'm so glad I'm sitting here on my couch watching this instead of being a part of this action scene, because people are getting fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, towards the end of a Small Town Crime with the Jaws scene, where he comes across him and it's just mutilated. It's one of those, as you speak of consequences, it is one of those, like, this is a bad guy, but even as the camera pans towards him and you hear the gurgling, you want to dislike it, but you're going, holy shit, so I do find it, I love how effective it is, and kind of, like I said, I feel you guys paint a picture with every little element, whether it be the sharp, realistic writing, the vistas, the way the camera moves. It's almost like you're painting each scene individually, and I truly feel the way you guys both use the gunplay and the violence to be extraordinarily effective, to really bring you into the situation, so you're not on the outside going, okay, I could have used Clifton Collins Jr. to come in and been a little bit more action guy-y. You're going, I don't want him to get shot. I saw what just happened. It's one of those things.
It's interesting to hear you cite that one moment in Small Town, because that was literally the intent. Like, in the script, we even wrote, you have an intermingling of sympathy and almost admiration for this guy, because he's still trying.
He's still going.
Even though he's just blown to bits.
As bad of a dude as he may be, he's a guy of honor, and one of his people has been slain, and he wants to kind of justify it and make amends for it. So, and I love how you have literally 3 walks of life come together. You've got Clifton Collins Jr., you've got Mike, and then you've got Robert Forrester, who is the grandfather who is ready just to make amends of his own and deal with the situation, to kind of give his granddaughter some closure, his deceased granddaughter. And my personal favorite, the little conversation in the car where he's playing the old school, and Rob, he looks at him and you have to listen to that, and this is old school, this is gold. Like, it's just every one of those layers that they give them. And I do find one thing in your guys' writing: nobody's stupid. I haven't come across a character in any of your writing that is just unbelievably dumb to the point of nobody would come to that conclusion. And I really appreciate that, because, like I said, each character has its own thing, and there has not been a character of yours I've seen that has let me down in any way, really.
Dude, awesome. I mean, honestly, it's interesting to hear you say that as well, because that is something Ian and I consciously go into. We love our characters, and they may not have the highest, some of them, may have varying degrees of education, but none of them are, as you said, simpletons or idiots, they're so dumb that you have to go along with their decisions.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. But they're making decisions that you can't believe they might make. Right.
Yeah.
We try to earn those moments of okay, he's doing this, but he's doing this because he's thinking this.
And yeah, I mean, even in a movie like Waffle House, where you have the one waitress who has left 3 times and then comes back as the 4th time, being rehired. It's still, that's something that's realistic. That's something that, to me, is not out of the realm of somebody going through life going, I hate this place, all right, I got to come back because I hate this place. I know people that have had that situation. So it's really refreshing to, when you dig into all of your characters, there's not one that is crazily unbelievable, and it's really refreshing, because so much of it nowadays is, what fairy tale do I have to spin to myself to believe that this character on screen is genuine? And with your guys' writing, it's flawless. It's there's no guessing of the motive. It is all you are your own individual character, and they're all fleshed out. And I really do enjoy your guys' writing for that.
Man, I love to hear that. Thank you.
So we need to talk a little bit about Fatman, and I've got a couple things. It's gonna get a little weird. No, along with the theme of your guys' writing theme of grounded and realistic and struggle, Fatman is very much that story as well. It is a real to life version of Kris Kringle, but you guys have also, I noticed as watching it, you almost toyed with the old school convections of what Santa Claus was, whether it be the Norwegian or the Krampus or Belschnickel. You kind of give him this. Well, you're very vague about his lore and his background, which I'm assuming was done intentionally. And because of that, you're allowed to manipulate it where you don't know how old he is. You don't know what forms he's taken. So to me, this Kris Kringle kind of was a Kringle of who's evolving in his own. For hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, he's been maybe these different characters. And this now, as he's older and tired, is he's kind of seeing the errors of his way as Santa Claus. Was it tough, though, to keep the reality based while trying to do a movie about Santa Claus?
So I think you got a couple of questions there, but the first one is like, what Ian and I really ruffles our feathers is when there's extraneous exposition in a movie that's unneeded, and it's just being disgorged to fill in. Oh, in ye olden time, it's just like, oh my gosh, I just get a migraine when I hear that stuff. So we're going to give you the information you need for this movie, and that's it. And
I love it. I do love it.
Yeah.
Because then it has me toying with the ideas of and I'll share with you guys in a second my theory on Ruth's background, because I do have one of those, and it's driven me nuts since I watched the movie. But yeah, it's one of the things, and here's one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the beginning, when he's in the bar. And I aptly call this, he kringled the one guy at the bar by reading who he was, his family, knowing he was, using his magic, which you guys kind of sprinkle. It's very much a grounded story, but, whether he's walking around the North Pole and the 4 soldiers are trying to lift up the thing, and he just kind of no problem, guys, let me help you out. The ending, of course, and I got to be honest, the ending of the movie almost made me. I was like, they better not have just done what I think they're going to do to him. There better be some sort of immortality clause in this Santa Claus. I just had to let you know, I loved the whole the idea of him still having that magic, but it's very much subdued. And I wanted to ask, was that completely intentional, or was it kind of as things went along? Because you guys said you had the script for 14 years. Was there maybe more explicit magic to Santa at first, and it kind of got pulled out, or was that always the intention?
That was always the way that it always kind of just was very grounded is how it was. When we approached it, think of it like us approaching it like something like, because we go back to this when someone asked us, I think we were trying to figure out what were the first DVDs we ever bought. And Esh was talking about how his first one was Unbreakable. That's something to think about, like what was maybe in our subconscious, because it certainly wasn't like, oh, let's do Unbreakable Santa, but it was in our minds of we really dug that film. We really liked that approach to the superhero genre. It was so grounded. And then my first DVD was Unforgiven. And I think if you smash those two together, this sort of Western tropes and this guy, who used to be a badass is sort of coming out of retirement, to try to reclaim his badassery, and he's anything but until the end. There's that kind of vibe to it as well. But yeah, we always wanted we approached the script in that if there was too much magic, it would pull you out of the reality of it. So that's why there was no him going down chimneys or going across the moon with his sleigh or ever even seeing the sleigh fly, because we were it'll just break you out of it. And those are, and it reads back to your question about what we were thinking with the sort of mixing of Santa lore as well, because there's so much baggage on Santa, and it's there's so much mystery and intrigue if you don't kind of take a lane, right? If you don't say, because there's all these little mysteries and intrigues about him, and his lore and his character has been portrayed in so many different ways. Like you said, you've got the Krampus version, you've got this Germanic Finland version where the guys, ripping children from their beds, and like they used to have, and this is what we were looking up. They used to have this, back in the olden times, they would threaten their children with Santa coming to get them, and they would say, "Be good," or Santa's gonna come and get you,
mess you up, take you away.
Yeah. Will come and snatch you if you're not a good child. And so like that, like where did that come from? You know what I mean? Like, so we were planting, we were knowing that we had all these seeds to work with. We were planting little sprouts along the way. And when you get to the end and he confronts the kid, he's back to that olden days, and he's been kind of hinting the whole movie that maybe I ought to get back to the way I used to do things. And you're like, well, what was that like? And then at the end, you see
when the film starts with him, he starts with him target practicing. You immediately wonder, like, okay, Santa's, he's just target practicing for no reason on a random day. Okay, I get a little bit of an idea of what type of Santa, what type of guy this is.
That's how he blows off steam. Yeah, it's like
he probably warms up in the evening with a little bit of bourbon. Like he's that guy.
He just needs a nice fire. He needs Ruth, which, by the way, and this is something I do want to mention. I don't feel. I've read over a lot of descriptions of Fatman and semi-reviews of Fatman and those little short clickbait articles. And frankly, I was frustrated with the fact that they focus so much on it's chaos Santa. It's an action movie Santa. It's a bloodbath. And when I watch Fatman, I was surprised really how much emotion is built into it, whether you have Ruth and Chris's relationship being that much of where it kind of reminds me of my wife and I's relationship, where we are, they're best friends. Without her, I don't think Fatman could operate. Or the scene where he tells his elves that they unfortunately have to do. By the way, an awesome take on the elves. I love the numbered system. It gives them that much more credence to know that you're talking to number 7. Although age limits we don't know ages. We know number 7 hundreds, if not thousands of years old. So I love that take on it. But I do feel that some people, when writing about this movie, did a disservice by not focusing on that. The fact that at the core of this movie is people just trying to live together. They're trying to love. Even Santa, as he's being shot at, the end scene with Walton Goggins, he still doesn't want to pull that trigger. He's still Santa. He still sees the young Walton Goggins that got just the Hot Wheels car from him. And I think that how do you guys feel about how it's kind of been received? Like, I know anybody talking about it's a good thing, but I do feel that more people should focus on the overall emotional core of the movie and not just they're gonna battle.
Yeah.
Sure.
Look, I mean, for us, there was no version of this movie without heart. Yeah. Like, it had to have a heart. It had to have an emotional and character arc for Kris. It couldn't just be a farcical, flamboyant bloodbath from nose to tail. That was never the movie we wanted to approach it as. I mean, just to go back just a little bit, like in the magical and fantastical elements, like we really wanted to approach that with a utilitarian perspective, right? Like, this is all the scenes between what you would see in Christmas Chronicles or the Santa Claus.
Okay.
And that's literally what we approached it as. Like, well, would you see that in the Santa Claus? You would. Okay, well, we're going to go before and after that moment.
Okay.
Because that's what we want to see. Because you can, you've got those other reference movies, and we're going to be, going in our own lane. But for us, like, yeah, I don't know what some people were expecting the movie to be. All Ian and I can go out and make the movie for the people who enjoy what it is, right? Like, you can't worry about that.
Yeah.
There's countless frustrations of, like, and we try to read as many of the reviews as, but you sort of have to take the reviews, and I mean, we've done a few movies now, and we've read a few good and bad reviews of everything we've ever made, and like, you just sort of you have to sort of, from our perspective, the way that we deal with it is, like, with the good reviews, great. I mean, they liked it, and they seem to get what we were after and whatnot. Those are wonderful to read, of course. But in some of the reviews where they don't understand what we were after, they start focusing on something that we're surprised they're focusing on, or they're complaining about something, or they wished it was a farcical, grenades up reindeers' asses and shit, and we're just like, damn, like, I mean, we just didn't. I'm sorry, we didn't make that movie. Like, that's just not even close to what we were after. It has nothing to do with what we were after, it's just really interesting to see. It's really interesting to see people wanting that movie. Because it just wasn't anything that we ever wanted to make. It has nothing to do with what we made. So, I mean, the whole movie for us was a big allegory for Christmas spirit and overcoming adversity. That was a huge part of it. I mean, it was funny because a friend of ours, we got a couple of notes early on where they were like, "Oh man, what do you think about clipping off that ending instead of ending it with them rebuilding and the cookies and the elf and like that kind of ending where they're like, well, we'll rebuild and we're gonna be bigger and better than before and we're gonna come back." They were like, "What do you think about clipping that off and just ending with him threatening the child?" And we're like,
decidedly dark.
Man, if you do that, you don't have you don't get the mythos of Kris and Christmas, really, right?
Yep.
Like now you're locked into this last image of him threatening a child and being like a crazy maniac, like a sort of more of a demon rather than, and he has that mode, but he really is about Christmas spirit. He really is about, he is really about goodness and trying to promote goodness. And I think that we didn't want to lose that. So we were like, no, we have to have that ending in there because at the end of the day, it is about overcoming, your adversities. It is about spreading goodness and will and cheer. It's just that sometimes you got to get your hands dirty,
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like he doesn't do it, right? But Kris literally cannot,
finish.
Take care of the skinny man.
You could tell, he's got that moment where he's got him dead to rights, but he's still Santa. And he still sees, because once again, we don't know how old he is, so he still sees the world in this kind of shiny glass snow globe. And I think a big part of the movie is him realizing that that shine on that snow globe is a little bit dimmer, the water's getting murky, and he's losing the love that he's carried across for perhaps hundreds of thousands of years. And I felt that was a big central theme with the character of Kris, is he was trying to figure out, it was essentially a midlife crisis, but you're Santa. Now you need to figure out if you still want to traverse the entire world in a night and get shot with a 308 by some kids because they shot up at you. And when he takes his shirt off and you see the decades or centuries of damage that he's taken and the scars, I love how that you don't overtly tell, you could, if you ignored certain scenes, say this guy could have been a Santa for 35 years, I don't know. But you add those little details of the damage he's taken and kind of the weather and how he talks about things. And I love that's how you kind of give the insight to the character of this is who he is. This is the man who happens to be Santa. It's kind of the inside the actor's studio of Old Saint Nick.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And it was funny to see, people at times, and these are even people that really dug the film, were like, "Oh man, I wouldn't have minded you seeing that kid, get a lot more comeuppance, or I wish he would have taken out that kid." And I'm just like, damn, right? It's he's Santa evil, Claus,
but he's still a child.
There has to be a path of redemption.
Yeah.
There has to be some path of redemption, right? So it's like you see the skinny man, you realize that guy's probably beyond repair. But you see the child, and you say, we at least have to be able to try to let that kid
rehabilitate it.
Yeah, and what's Santa to do? You know what I mean? What is he to do here when coal doesn't work and you get this far down the lane? I think he's got to kick it up a notch.
It's an amazing scene too. Just the whole
they're so good at it.
There's two moments in the movie where I feel that Mel Gibson allows himself to go a little bit into the Martin Riggs. And the first scene I think of is the standoff between him and the skinny man, where he blatantly tells him, you think I got this job because I'm fat and jolly? You're not the first. That is an entirely bad. Remove Santa from the equation. Somebody's coming to kill you, and you tell them that, you're a badass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And the second is the end scene with Billy. and how he starts to get that guttural, that Mel Gibson guttural. When you guys are filming these scenes, are you getting like goosebumps? Are you sitting there going, we got Martin Riggs in our movie? Like, because to me, I fanboy out on everything. And if I were behind that lens, I'd be like, I'm gonna go take just a quick break because I've literally got Mel Gibson in front of me playing Santa. This is a dream come true.
You're not wrong, my friend. Yeah, there was many like you got to pinch your arm moments because you can't believe it's all coming together, especially with this movie, which we thought would be a much longer road before we got the opportunity to make it, just because of how wild it was, in concept.
Yeah, we probably the scene that we were pinching ourselves the most on, at least I was the one where they were facing off against each other in the snow and yelling back and forth before the firefight kicked off. I mean, when we were shooting the firefight, it was amazing, but it was also so technical, and we had so many different elements going on that we were trying to track because we couldn't shoot it in order. We had weather issues. We couldn't trample the snow. There was just a lot of problems. So our minds were more in continuity on actors and whatnot. Our minds were all over that rather than enjoying any moment that we were having. But in the moment where they're standing off against each other and it's snowing and all the atmosphere is just there organically, there was no post needed in those wide shots to try to get the snow a little thicker or anything. It was just that amazing. Those wides are completely 100% organic. And that was actually, we're shooting that live and like they're across from each other and they're yelling those lines back and forth. And it being those two actors, and especially like what weight and gravitas Mel's career has had on us as humans and filmmakers. Like, it was just amazing to have him yelling those lines back and forth with Walton, again, another legend, yelling back and forth at each other, like in character. Like, I remember turning to Eshom and go, can you fucking believe this? Like, that we got these two amazing people out here to do this thing with us? This is ridiculous.
I mean, God, you would just hear stuff over the walkie, and they're like, can the elves and the military and Mr. and Mrs. Kringle please come to the set? And we're like, I can't believe someone gave us money to go make this movie. Like,
it paid off because I got to tell you, I loved it. Like I said, I wouldn't shut up about it to the guys until they agreed to, like, because we were doing December, we were doing Christmas movies, so we were doing 3 movies a week for review, and we just couldn't cram in Fatman, no pun intended, but because it was just, it was full, because you got everything from Die Hard to Christmas Vacation, so you're trying to fit the gamut. And I made them agree that, like, our first review back was going to be Fatman, because I had bought it, I watched it, and I was like, we need to, seriously, guys, like, enough's enough, no bullshit. Now, I do want to ask about Ruth, and there's a couple questions both on the character and as well how she's portrayed. First off, I have a theory, and if you don't have to say yes or no to this. Ruth having the British accent, Ruth using the musket, you give clues into how old they are. For a prequel, are we thinking are we going maybe a colonial era, or is it more on the open seas? She was in an island that was known for perhaps some boat travelers, once known as pirates. See, as soon as I heard her accent and I saw the musket, my mind is going like, what is this origin story? So to me, I'd love to see a sequel, but I'd love to see a prequel of basically, think about it. Ruth is a woman of color. Think about the past of, the world, this country hasn't been very well treating of people of color up until things have started to change now. I just think of the opportunity of exploring their relationship as, yeah, he's Santa, yeah, she's Mrs. Claus, but there was a time when they were courting. He was courting her, and they were a white guy and a woman of color out together, that it couldn't have been easy. And I think that kind of mystery you leave out there does solidify in my mind that they really are best of friends, that these two have seen some shit together. And all I think about is, like, is there any plans for a prequel, sequel? Do we have the ideas?
So it's interesting because when we first conceived the idea, we wrote two short stories. And one was very much what the movie is now, but the other one was a prequel.
Oh, okay.
And so there was certainly a fertile ground for us to have the characters going forward into the movie that we produced currently. We absolutely cannot wait to explore some of that prequel material. But I think right now our idea is to sort of thread the needle. And so we want to do both.
Okay.
We want to continue the contemporary story, but also give you a little bit more of their backstory.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting concept. You can, I mean, I think the way you guys write and the way you direct everything, that'd be no problem for you to be able to kind of flash back between the current or the present and the past. I frankly can't really look forward to that, because the boys and I, we text while we watch these movies, and one of the things I immediately sent out was, dude, was she a pirate? Was she colonial? She's British. What is going on? And the decision to have, because in my opinion, Ruth is the glue. Ruth is the North Pole glue. Ruth is the and you guys did take from the conventional Mrs. Claus of her being a healer when you think about it. But the biggest thing she heals is Kris. She is his lifeblood, in my opinion. Without Ruth, Kris would go back to the North Pole and just eat cookies until he bloated and died. Now, was it? How did the decision of having her be the one that does the final dirty act because Kris couldn't come into play? Was that always the plan, or was there kind of like a, I don't think Kris could handle this one. Ruth is going to have to step in again.
So there's two things here. Like, number one, like Ruth, the relationship that Kris and Ruth have is very much modeled after our own parents and inspired by. So our dad had the photography studio. He was very much like the front man of the business, But without our mom, that thing would be in shambles. Our dad didn't know how to balance a checkbook. He didn't know how to pay his taxes. He didn't know, he knew how to take pictures. That's what he did. And our mom sort of kept, and then ultimately she was a very accomplished photographer in her own right. But she ultimately knew when to deal him, knows still to this day, when to deal him that tough love and when to be nurturing. And so she's sort of his psychoanalyst that keeps him going forward. And so we were very much modeling their relationship on our own parents.
And our mom and dad are both incredibly tough people. But yeah, that ending, and the ending came about just with, we're always trying to subvert an audience's expectations. And so I can't recall if we came up with the ending first and then went back, and because that happens sometimes. You'll write an ending, you'll get to because we like to write pretty organically. So we'll come up with an idea for the beginning, we'll come up with an idea for the ending, then we'll just start writing. Then you have a few ideas for that middle ground, that act 2 of what you might be doing. But sometimes you get to that third act, you get in there and you start to find some fun things and some fun twists, and you're like, oh well, this might keep them off guard, and this will be a fun twist, and this will feed into this character trait, and oh, this will be awesome because she's the strong one, or you know what I mean, like, and oh, he's Santa, so of course he can't do it, like you have all these like cool discussions, Eshom and I, between each other of like why and what's happening and where. And then sometimes you got to go back to the beginning of the script and start layering that back in and changing some scenes and getting it all functioning so that when you get to the end, it all makes sense, and and hopefully no one was onto your scent that that was going to happen. But it earned. So I can't recall how that went down, but I do recall our discussion about the ending and like why and how is very on point. It was very much like, he's a badass. He beats this guy, but that guy has one more trick up his sleeve. And it's a devastating blow, and of course it was Kris's weakness. It's his strength, but it ends up being his weakness because he's a caring person. He doesn't want to kill this guy. He's giving this guy every chance. He's your hero. He's benevolent. He's giving. He loves, and of course that moment of weakness is what Skinny Man uses to kill him or to get him when you think he killed him. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, of course his lady's gonna come out and fight for him, but then it's like she gets shot, and then it's like, oh my God, like, because people. For me, I was like, no, you just shot him in the eyeball. Don't do Ruth this way. Like, as I was watching it, I was like, you are not gonna
You're not gonna do like I was having an existential breakdown at the thought that you were gonna kill off Santa at the end of the movie. That I was in a huff of just like you're gonna kill him. You're gonna go do Ruth now. What the hell? And so the end of the movie for me was very much like, don't do this. Don't do this.
Which is awesome.
Like very much in the spoiler section here, but like we're hoping by design that the movie is keeping you off balance just enough that you're like, holy shit, is this the movie where Skinny Man puts on the coat? Or is you know what I'm saying? Like, because we've like by the structure of the movie, like Skinny Man kind of takes over. Like it hands off to him, and you're like, oh no, like this is the movie where it's gonna go down like that.
Yeah, when he gets that advantage, my whole just dropped. It was just like real. Like I love Walton Goggins. But I am a archetypal, in the comfort food section of movies, I call it, am a good guy wins, bad guy loses. And I do appreciate when the bad guy wins in movies, but in this particular instance, I was very much like, don't let this happen to me. Like, so then, you have your end scene where Gibson does come back, and once again, it's, as you said, it's Ruth is in my opinion, she's there always for him. It's unlike, you think about it, well, where does Santa go to rest his head? Well, Ruth is where he goes to rest his head.
Yeah.
And I had a thought in my head of the connection between Billy and Skinny Man. And this movie, as you have said before, is very rooted in lessons. And I do wonder, is the lesson between Billy and Skinny Man, especially with Fatman coming back and they have that conversation, that kind of scared straight conversation, was there any thought of Skinny Man being almost the future version of Billy unchecked? Someone that has grown up full of anger, full of spite, full of hate, and has never had that course correction? Was there a connection with that character kind of being basically the future version of Billy?
Absolutely, 200%. I mean, for us, it was a baton pass that you pick up with Billy. You see how they came from different childhoods. I don't know if I necessarily see Skinny Man coming from a very rich, wealthy backdrop, but I do see him dealing with the same things as like neglect and abuse. And even if it's not like, Skinny Man obviously, had cigarettes put out on him. He dealt with physical abuse as well as neglect. And I know that the boy is dealing with neglect, and then you could say somewhat abuse through that neglect, as he's not even really paying attention to his child. He gets him a teddy bear, something that he doesn't like. He has no interest in the interests of his child, which is heartbreaking. But yeah, we definitely saw it as a baton pass of like, okay, there's this little kid. You see him pass off to this hitman, and this hitman is obviously where Billy's headed. So, and that is one of the reasons, that redemption moment at the end of the movie was so important for us, because it was like, okay, if this guy, you're seeing a version of this kid that's really like, this guy's gone, and we have a chance with the kid, although a slight one. He's on the verge of killing his grandmother at the very end, so he's on the verge of sort of crossing that line.
Yeah. And with the milk, I was like, oh my. Oh.
I think we lost Esh.
Yep,
I think he might be.
He'll probably pop back in just a second. And that's also something I had noticed too, and it goes back to kind of you keeping everything grounded. Hello again.
Hey.
In reality, is you did give humanity to not only Billy, and in the fact that you said this kid has been neglected. He obviously is craving. It's that kind of that old story of like, you give this kid a family who loves him and is there for him, you could potentially save him. And I think that shows that even though this, he's threatening torture of a fellow 10-year-old for a ribbon, so he's quite evil, but in the same context, it's all within the parameters of this kid doesn't have good structure. His grandmother doesn't have the time or the health to pay attention to him. His dad's not there. So you do feel bad for him, knowing that, like, well, as much as you're supposed to kind of look at this character as like, well, you're the catalyst for all this badness that's going to happen, it's not 100% your fault. And I felt that was a way of kind of humanizing him.
200%. Absolutely. I mean, we didn't want to dwell on it too much. So, I mean, I think there's one little moment with the dad and the teddy bear, and then you get a couple of hints from the grandma as she kind of lays it down of like, oh, this is, your dad's not going to make it, so you get these, he's in the Bahamas, you get these ideas of like, the dad is off doing his own thing, and the kid is left to fend for himself with his alien grandmother, who's also kind of not a great influence at times. No. You can see.
Then you have and obviously we're in spoilers here, but the kind of end result where even the grandmother catches on to what's been going on with the when her accountant gives her the call, and it kind of, there's that little bit of that full circle of like that lesson of the consequences. No matter what you do in life, if you're going to be doing evil as Billy's doing, there's going to be consequences. And I think that's kind of an incredible lesson to set up, even with a character like Billy, who you're supposed to very much dislike. I was surprised that I was sitting there kind of like, maybe he's not that bad of a kid. Like he's bad, but maybe it's not, it's not all his fault. He's got some right. circumstances that aren't great for him.
Yeah, I always feel like, especially when you see some of these programs where prisoners who have been convicted of some pretty horrific things, get a sort of second chance on life or a second lease on life. I don't know. I think a lot of things happen in the heat of the moment, and I think a lot of people make bad decisions because they're sort of led by smaller bad decisions, and those smaller bad decisions compound and build into bigger ones, and then pretty soon, you think you're kind of invincible and that you're not accountable, and then, that's absolutely a major theme in our film is the accountability of what you're doing and who you are. And I do think Billy, it's possible for that kid to be redemptive. I also think there's a possibility for that kid to be a train wreck down the road, but he's got a chance. He's got a chance.
Well, now that Santa's kind of, and I think a big part of that as well, at least the way I took it, was Santa learned a lesson as well. And that lesson was, these kind of jaded goggles he's been looking through his, he was able to see Billy in Skinny Man. He understood when they were facing off that this is what happens when you do judge immediately and you do give them coal and you do cast these certain kids off as being not worthy of it or not good enough. I did take it as Fatman, Santa, he did learn that lesson too of maybe I need to get my head back in the game. And I feel like that was why he came back at the end and did the redemption over the let me just rip his head off with my teeth. He came in and that's why he tried to pull Billy away from that spectrum.
Exactly. I mean, he says it in that last scene where he says, I think this is partly my fault. And I think he's realizing, we were kind of nodding to, when you're a kid, you don't ever see Santa unless you're at the mall. And then you quickly realize, after a year or two, or maybe even that year, that that's not really Santa.
Yeah.
Then everyone kind of starts telling you that's a representative of Santa. Santa can't be everywhere at the same time. So there's all these little white lies being told. But in the end, it really is Kris feeling that he hasn't been out there personally. He hasn't probably for at least hundreds of years, he has not been out there personally doing the job he should be doing. He's been kind of reclusively hiding out in this sort of snow bungalow, making things and going out one night a year and kind of doing this delivery of like who's been good, who's been bad. But really, he hasn't really been out there personally, investing in people and putting his time in a way that is like on a personal level. And so I think he feels responsible for that, and he wants to amend for that. So he does it old school. He starts one kid at a time.
Yeah, that end scene is one of those things where it really does it reinforces the idea that he's still Santa. Like he just lost, and it also shows you how much over the years he's willing to sacrifice for the better good of all the children, whether it be the scars on his body or him, losing an eyeball due to combat of the man this kid sent at him. He's still in it as Santa Claus, and he's still there to try to be, good old Saint Nick. I love that part about it. I did want to, before we wrap up, I know you guys have a couple more projects in the works, and that excites me. So first off, I want to ask, how are things going with the Carrie and Me? That is a movie that, as I told my wife about it, it was an immediate, so I will be watching that no matter what in the future. How's things going with that film?
It was a heartbreaking decision, but when we went off to go shoot Fatman, they wanted to start making that around that same time. And they said, hey, if you guys go off and make Fatman, are you like, we have to, like, and Carol asked us, and Tina asked us, and Steven asked us. They just said, hey, we want to make it this year as well. So we gave them our blessing, because, I mean, as much as we love that project, and we really do, Fatman is something we'd been trying to get going for 14 years. And when that opportunity arose, it was kind of like, are we ever going to get another chance to make this damn thing? So we jumped on it and went the Fatman route and gave them our blessing. You know, we wrote the script and we passed it off to them, and that's kind of where we left it. So I know that they are getting a new filmmaker. I'm not quite sure who it is, but they have a new filmmaker, and they're currently working on the project, and hopefully, you know, going to get it up, and hopefully soon. But yeah,
but like you, like, we're thrilled to see it when it comes out, because we have a lot of passion for that project, and poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it.
I
that's
actually,
great.
You know, knowing, you know, talking to you guys, and like I said, one of my favorite parts about whether it's your film, your shorts, and I don't know how too deeply you guys get into the actual writing and production of the, excuse me, the blanking on me, the TV show that you guys are executive
Everyone's
producing.
doing.
Yeah, I don't know how deep you are in there, but I mean, you know, it still does have that same quality of. I did watch several episodes, and I do appreciate in that each character is as well very realistically written, and so I don't know how deep you guys are into that. What made you kind of jump ship into that and try to do your own type of? I know it's like an independent show, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's with one of our longtime collaborators, James Lafferty.
Great, I love him.
I
love him, and you know, everything. He was, I believe, Tony in Small Town Crime. You've got him, obviously the main character in Waffle Street. I noticed he was in the show. He's got a very distinctive voice. It's that type of voice where you hear it and you're like, that's James Lafferty. And how did that relationship kind of develop with you working with him on virtually almost every project?
We shared a manager together many years ago, Catherine James, and she repped James and repped us, and she kept saying, "Oh, you got to meet James. You got to meet James. He's he was working on One Tree Hill at the time, but he's a very talented writer, and he had been writing a lot of scripts. And so she's like, I'm going to pass him some of your scripts, and if you guys want to read a couple of his scripts, and go have lunch together." And so that's what it is. We went out, we read some scripts. We were like, let's go have lunch, and we just hit it off with him as a fellow creative. I mean, he's just a great guy. He's in it for all the right reasons. We really enjoyed his scripts, like truly and utterly and completely. And we came away from that meeting, and Ian and I at the time were writing a movie, Lost on Purpose, which is a love letter to our hometown. We shot it in our hometown. And we were like, James would be really great for one of the roles in that film. So we hit him up, and we're like, hey, dude, we're going to go and shoot this, renegade independent film in our hometown. Are you up for that kind of adventure? And he's like, well, let me read it. I'm from a small town. And so we read it, and he resonated, and bang, we were off making Lost on Purpose, a few months later. And from that, and he's just so in it to win it. He's so down for the cause. And he's a great human. And when you get that alchemy, that you're like, oh, like, let's hang out with this person more, And James is just that dude for us.
And so he
came
brought
us.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when he brought us Everyone's Doing Great, and it was while we were shooting a little pickup scene for Small Town Crime, he was like pitching. He's like, I got this thing. It's kind of meta. It's like, I want to do it with my friend Stephen Coletti, and it's about some of our, roughly inspired by some of our misadventures here in Hollywood and all that stuff. And I want to kind of encapsulate those years, like, and we're like, oh, that sounds amazing, dude. And he would tell us some stories, and we were having a good roll on some of them. I mean, they're amazing, really awkward, and it's tremendous. What you have to endure in the public when you're in the public eye like that, it's really interesting perspective. And so we were like, let's do it. And so I remember when it came time, to do it, to facilitate the show, we were like, oh, well, it needed to be independent. It needed to be, sort of a grassroots effort because we didn't have a lot of money. And so we just pulled together a lot of the resources that, James had worked with many of the collaborators that did the show with him over the years, over some of our subsequent films. And so we just got that band back together and went out and did the EDG pilot with him. And then they did the Kickstarter, and we were able to go and do the series, which is a real blessing.
You guys did Kickstarter for Lost on Purpose as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
to do some of the finishing funds and the releasing of it.
Now, are you guys more in favor of a system like that, or going out through other means of getting independent funding? Because I know they've got to be kind of kind of polar opposites in where you're asking basically the audience to put in, and over here you're asking, you know, people with money and the studios to put in. Which do you prefer?
I'll say it's a give and take with each, right? I mean, it's great to have the support of the fans and to have a base there of people really excited about the movie and invested in it personally and emotionally.
And that can fuel you as a creative, right? To have all these people excited about the project, like that fuels you.
Does it build the nerves though? Because now you're like, I had 40,000 people. That guy gave me $5, didn't get his coffee that day. You know, I got to make a movie they like. Like, does it kind of fuel you in that where it's like, no, we're doing this for our fans, you know, for the people that want to see it? Does it give you that extra motivation, or is it more daunting?
I feel like that part is more inspirational because we're definitely inspired by people, you know, wanting to take a personal investment in something that we're doing because I don't know, it means a ton to us. And I know that, you know, they're not sitting there with millions of dollars. They're sitting there with, hey, let me give you $20. Hey, let me give me $105 because that's what I can spend. And that means more than to us, honestly, than millions of dollars from somebody who is just thinking of it as a product, you know,
numbers game.
So, but the hard part about the crowdfunding is the sort of deliverables of it, is the promotion of it, is keeping. I mean, you've got 40,000 people on there, let's say, and you have to respond to 40,000 people, and that can be great, but it can also be really overwhelming when you're trying to put a movie together at the same time. So it can be a lot, and it's fantastic, but it can be a lot at times. So that part of it, that's the hardest part of it, is just trying to manage all of it. You know, and it's a lot of moving pieces, and it's a lot of like, oh, I got to get all this swag out, and I got to get it made, and I got to keep up. I like, you want to, but you know, when you're dealing with thousands of people, it's hard for one person or two people to be, you know,
personally engaged in every one of these.
Personally engaged with everything all the time.
Especially when you're steeped in the process too. I mean, there's you know, you guys. I'm assuming I have my, you know, I'm not nearly the level you guys are, but I'd assume you have a creative zone that when you're in it, if you know, like me, I'll go tunnel vision whether I'm editing or writing content, and I'd assume that it's a little hard when you have these messages being sent to you about, hey guys, come on, Kickstarter fans need a response, and you're like, really? Because I'm just trying to write a movie. You know, like I'd imagine that'd be a little harder than the average script writing process.
And I think you totally get it. Like that's really the ultimate trick, is down the road. Like when the demands of the everyday maintenance start impeding on the creative process, and so you have to sort of like go quarantine a zone and be like, okay, and for us, our zone is usually after Ian's kids go to bed until about midnight or 1 a.m. like, because there's no emails coming in. Like that's the optimal time, right? Like you know, I'll get over to Ian's place around noon too, and we'll work until I'm there until like midnight, 1 a.m. You know, like that's a given day. But you're trying to get work done during the day, but there's so many interruptions, there's so many emails, calls from the team. You know, you're just trying to field the everyday, you know, chores of the business. And so that is like, it is, you have to find that time, and it might be that 3 hours in the, you know, darn near in the middle of the night, where it's the most productive because the world is quiet.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, if you're getting financing from somebody, you know, there's a lot of responsibility with that, and there can be cooks in the kitchen. So you gotta, like, you get money from somebody, but then they have an idea of what or how they want something to be done, and it may not arise right off the bat, but it could arise in post, or, you know, once they see your edit, they're like, well, you know, I wish this went another way, or maybe we do some pickups and shoot another ending, or, you know, and you're just like, oh, I think this is working really well. We're getting great feedback. Why would we need to do that?
This is where I'm going. That I could see being very frustrating when it's everybody, you know, well, I kind of saw this scene going. Well, yeah, I didn't. That's why I filmed it this way. Thank you, though. I can understand that being very frustrating. I did want to ask... There's good and bad things about both. There's good and bad things about both, right? I mean, it's nice to get a lump of money and some financiers that are behind you that are very savvy in the business and can help you in a bunch of ways, but it's hard. It could be hard if they have opinions that don't match your own. And then on the other side of it, it's wonderful to have a bunch of fans, you know, give you the liberty of putting your vision out there. You're like, awesome, I get to do,
what I wanted to do with this. This is awesome. But then the other side of it is, you've got a lot of upkeep and a lot of a lot of stimulation, that's drawing you away from what you should be doing all the time. But yeah, it's just a give and take, and it's like every project's different. Some of them I think warrant a Kickstarter type vibe because you want to do something so kind of rogue and wild with it. Whereas like EDG it was such a departure from although when it's holding hands with One Tree Hill, it is a complete opposite mirror vision of One Tree Hill. The horrors, of where these characters, obviously a lot of it's fictionalized, but a lot of it's mental. Well,
it's back to that human struggle element that kind of it's like these they have the money, they have the popularity, but they're people. And I think that's you guys, in my opinion, it's emotion, and there's a lot of psyche building that you do with the characters, which is amazing.
But that was like entirely James and Steven's brainchild. Like they wrote everything, they directed everything, like they edited it all. Like that was it's
please give them my compliments.
Their vision.
I've become a pretty big James Lafferty fan.
I love to hear that.
Part of it's the voice. I don't know. There's just something. That guy, if he did books on tape, I'd be all about it. Just there's something about his voice. But yeah, no, my wife loved him in Waffle Street, especially. We watched it last night. So please give him my kindest regards. Before we do wrap up, I do have one question, and it's only I did read you guys were potentially doing a sci-fi project with Octavia Spencer. Is there anything going on with that? Anything you could say? Because you guys making things at this point excites me. So anything I can know, I'd like to know.
Well, look, we've always had a reverence for science fiction. I think a lot of the mistakes, like a lot of the stuff that really, I wouldn't say mistakes, but for us, science fiction always comes off so sterile. Like the characters are very flat and monotone. They can have that effect. That seems to be like what the future looks like, right? Everyone loses their personality. And so for us, like we'd really love to bring our flavor and tone into the science fiction canon, into the genre.
I think that'll be awesome. I mean, and you are right. There is very much, almost, not that it's excused, but if you're doing a science fiction movie, a lot of the characters are allowed to be a little bit more one-dimensional because you're more focused on whether it be the atmosphere or the fact that you're in a spacecraft. And that was going to be my other point was like, are you guys planning on bringing sort of that grounded perspective to sci-fi as well? Or are we kind of maybe trying to tread a little bit more into a fantasy direction?
There's definitely always a grounded element. So I mean, if you can't, like, if we can't sell you on the believability of it, like, I think that is going to be a massive misstep, because it will be for us anyway. It'll be seen as an epic failure by us. So I think selling you on, if it's a horror film, if it's a sci-fi film, selling you on the believability of what's happening and how it's happening, and that this can be real or is real, is probably paramount. And then on the other side of that, like, also equally as important to us is getting characters that you can relate to and sympathize and empathize with, and hopefully want to see persevere through whatever struggle we throw at them.
Like, I mean, that's what makes Harrison so great in Star Wars. Like, that's what makes him so amazing in Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just this every guy that's like cracking jokes. He's not perfect all the time. Like
he screws up.
Yeah.
He accidentally moved. Yeah, no, yeah, I'd agree. And you did peek in, you said horror movie. Is there any interest in you guys doing a horror project? Because if you tell me you're going to do a horror movie soon, I'm going to lose my shit, to be honest with you, because I'm a huge horror movie fan.
We got an iron in the oven, so it's definitely something we're looking at.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We've been working on a script. It's a ways from being done because we've been kind of sidetracked with a couple of the other things we've been doing, but we always go back to it. We constantly go back to it and are trying to finish it. But yeah,
but we're excited where it's going.
It is a horror sci-fi.
Okay, so I'll tell you right now, if you guys ever need any references, any to bounce ideas off, we are huge horror movie fans. So ever got an idea, shoot me, on Twitter, just hit me a message. I will give you my honest opinion. But I'd like to wrap everything up with you guys today. I want to thank you so much for being with me. I had a lot of fun. Everybody check out not only Fatman, I think it's very important to check out your entire breadth of work, because you guys are such great writers that it doesn't matter whether it's a Santa Claus movie, a gritty noir, semi-westerner about an alcoholic ex-cop, or a guy who lost everything is now working in a Papa's Chicken or a Papa's Waffles. You really do know how to find kind of the center. So I want to encourage everybody, check out Fatman. It's VOD everywhere. Is it on? Has it gotten a disc release, Blu-ray, DVD, and all that?
It is.
That
It
man.
is there. It
Okay,
happened.
good.
We got the Blu-ray and the DVD format.
I swapped over to mainly purchasing digital. I used to collect, and then I was like, I've got 700 DVDs and Blu-rays on a shelf, and it's like, all right, maybe digital is the better way to go. But check out Small Town Crime, one of my favorite movies in a long time. I had seen it when it first hit Netflix. It's amazing. It really is one of those movies. Before I knew you guys were attached to it, I had watched Fatman and then looked you guys up and realized that you had written and directed Small Town Crimes. And I was like, no way, I love this movie. And the same thing with Waffle Street. It is one of those movies where, despite dealing with some subject matter, trying to persevere, it's a lighthearted movie. It is a great one. Lost on Purpose as well. That one is another great film. And that one, for me, you guys had C. Thomas Howell, Jane Krasinski. That movie is another one of those ones where, as you guys speak of, it's all about that work ethic. It was how your parents were. It's how you guys were raised. And I truly do feel it comes through in all of your work. Everybody, please check out all of their films, everything they're doing. Go check it out. I'm wildly excited for a sci-fi horror film you guys are working on. So please let me know when that starts coming to fruition.
Thank you, too, guys. Thank you so much.
thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
It's been a lovely chat. Honestly, it really has.
And
Thank you.
anytime, if you guys ever want to come on, like I said, we do weekly episodes. If there's ever a time where you want to come back, if you want to talk about something new you're doing, I had a lot of fun with you guys. And like I said, I love your writing. I'm looking forward to the next movie that I force, my coworker, my co-host to pay attention to, so we can review it, because I absolutely love everything you guys have done that I've seen so far.
Well, I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
man.
much. You guys have a wonderful day, and take care.
All right,
All right,
you too.
brother.
Thanks.
Bye.